Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of At the Elephants. We're going to be doing some mini episodes on a series as we get to know the cast and crew of Martin Sherman's Bent in New York, a play that you should definitely go check out. Details for that at the end of this clip. So jump to the end now, write them down, screenshot it, come back, start the video again, and watch my awesome interview with Mr. Michael Calciano, class of 2015. Who is reprising his role of Greta in the show. We had a chat about it. Let's take a look.
How you doing, man? It's good to see you.
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm on at the
You're
elephants.
on At the Elephants right now. It's happening. The time has come. And I should clarify, as it's true for everybody else I'm going to talk to. This is not like your main episode. We'll have a main episode where you and I talk more. We get more into the Calciano as it is. You know
I
what
was
I mean?
hoping. I was like, does this disqualify me? I
Absolutely
guess.
not. Like I just did a
Oh,
20-minute
good.
episode with Kira where I have to convince her to let me post it, even though she doesn't want me to. But it was great. It was awesome. No, we'll do a full interview. We may do it this way because with me being in Austin right now, it's this is like my main way to be able to get to people.
Yes.
So it may come up that way, but one way or another, we'll do one that's not all about this show. But we'll say starting the actual Bent interview right now.
Okay.
Um,
Start.
but, I don't know if you've listened to my show much, but I do not premeditate very well. I'm not good at, I don't have a list of questions here to ask you. I just want to talk to you about the show.
Yeah.
So you're doing Bent again. You did it 5 years ago, right?
Exactly.
Just tell me a little bit about what it was like when you did it the first time.
We were just talking about this today. It was a Keys to the Kingdom production, and it was crazy because it was we would rehearse like 11 at night to like 1 in the morning, and like we were rehearsing like when we could. So it was a lot more rushed in a way. We had a lot of time working on it, but if doing it now, I'm like, oh, relaxed. We're here. We're doing this. This is what we're doing. Where at the time,
Right.
originally, it felt like there was a million things going.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because that is the whole format of Keys to the Kingdom. And I think technically the first Keys to the Kingdom thing that qualified was How I Learned to Drive. Because
Yeah.
we were, it was a directing project, but we did that together. And it was in the screening room, and it was the first theatrical production, if I remember correctly, that was done in that space. So
Indeed, it
it
was.
really, if I remember Carl telling me, it was like, let's see if we could do something in there. And then if it works, this is the idea I have, and it'll go in that space if it works. I like to think that production went pretty well. I got some pretty good feedback. You're a huge part of that, buddy. But I loved seeing all of the stuff that got done in that room after we did it.
Yeah.
Because when you're in such a tight space, and for anyone who's listening or watching, the RJR screening room was previously a screening room for DMP where they would show movies and occasionally have video conferences. It was super underutilized. I don't know exactly what they're doing it for now, but I think Keys to the Kingdom is still a thing. So
It still is. Just talk to someone today. They're still doing it.
I love that. It's so
Yeah.
great, and it's such a... I love the way that it works specifically because they say, we are not going to give you any extra time to do this.
Yeah.
You only get to do this if you can fit it in with all
Yeah.
the other stuff that you're doing. So the conditions you
You
just
gotta want
described.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got to
Yeah.
want it, and you got to figure out how to fucking do it
Yeah.
because it is not set up for you to oh, they want to do a play on their own. Well, let's cut their classes down a little bit and make sure they have time. No, fuck that. If you think you can do something else, it has to be something else.
Yep.
And so you guys really soaked in that. But now, are you guys dealing with something similar? Do you have day jobs or anything that's keeping you from focusing on the show at all?
I mean, yes, I'm
I'm sure you
sure.
got
I don't know
personal
about like
lives, right?
everyone's things, but yeah, I'm like juggling a few like side hustles and other things. Yes. So there is a little bit of that, but I think a lot of us are very much like down for like, we've blocked out the time for the rehearsal and we have like a good amount of, full rehearsal schedule. So yeah, it feels like there is more time for some reason than it did at school.
Are you
Yeah.
playing the same part that you played?
Yeah.
So talk
Yeah.
to me about her.
Yes. I'm Greta. She's a drag queen in like the 1930s Berlin scene. So it's not like your RuPaul's Drag Race drag queen. She's a little grungier. She's like the total mom, business owner. She's harsh but loving. She's like so many things. And I'm so excited to get to play her again because I don't think I fully I don't want to like poo-poo my earlier self, but I don't know how uh, I didn't know the drag world so much or understand totally what it was for. I tried to, but now I think I have a deeper understanding of that.
So you've spent more
And
time in the drag world since you did the show.
yeah,
In
yeah,
what capacity?
thank you, RuPaul's Drag Race. But watching that show, and not just, it is a different kind of drag because it's the 1930s,
Of
but you
course.
understand the spirit of it from watching that
Right.
show, which I didn't do before. And yeah, once I saw that, I was like, oh, yeah, it's kind of like holding up a mirror to society in a way. And I know, like, RuPaul, I think, says it's best, like, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. Like, it's like, putting that mask on and when it's so absurd, like a man dressed as a woman, like we're all putting costumes on.
Right.
And when I put this costume on, you're going to listen to me. And that I think is like the power of it that I'm really excited to do this time.
It's really curious, right, how drag has evolved. Obviously it's a huge part of our mainstream culture now, which who, would have thought that might ever even happen because the
Right,
whole
right.
idea behind drag, and please correct me if I'm wrong in this regard, but it is a rebellion.
Yes,
There is something
exactly.
deeply rebellious about this because you are fundamentally saying to society, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I don't want
Yeah,
you want me to do this. Maybe I'll do it sometimes, but I'm not doing it all the
yeah,
fucking time because sometimes I want to be like this, despite
yeah.
what you say is allowed or whatever. But one of the things that I think is funny, I was just thinking about this the other day in regards to drag in general. For a long time, the British in particular, drag was like the funniest thing you could do.
Yeah,
It was like British straight men who were not
yeah,
drag queens
right.
would do drag in like Monty Python and stuff like that. And it was like this, and I don't know if it's something about the British sensibility of humor or whatever, and it kind of plays in America. We definitely did. It's like that's one of the reasons why Tootsie is funny.
Yeah.
It's
Or Mrs.
fun.
Doubtfire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
We fundamentally are like, oh, that's not how that's supposed to be. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I feel like that's maybe falling off though, because with the mainstream nature of it, it's like, is it that funny anymore to see, you know, a man we know is just a straight man playing a character in a movie dressed like a woman? Like, is that really entertaining anymore? And I think
Right.
without some of the depth that you're talking about in particular of especially the time period and understanding the culture and all that kind of stuff, I don't know if you could even do that anymore. Like, could you make Mrs. Doubtfire again? I don't know. I feel like
I mean,
probably not. Well, they're
people
doing the
are.
musical.
Yeah, I know. But I know what you mean.
If it
Yeah,
wasn't already a movie.
it's a different thing though. I think like that's important. Like I agree. There is like this thing. I saw a show and like there was like the gag was a straight man dressed as a woman. And I was like, it's not hitting in the same way. I think a straight man dressed as a woman who's like hilarious and knocking it out of the like there's it's not just putting on the clothes that's gonna
Right.
like give you the effect that you're looking for, which I
Right.
think people relied on really heavily. And now it's like, no, you got to do something. You got to like make me question something or make me laugh or make me see something differently.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it plays like just like a farce. It's like
Yeah.
Charlie's Aunt or something like that. Which, granted, done well, is
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
hilarious because
Definitely.
especially in that context, it's like here's a guy who does not want to be in drag. Like
Right.
he is being put in this position by his friends who are like, no, you got to do this. And so yeah, I love the idea that you guys are sort of plunging into this old world. So what are you finding? You've already kind of touched on some of it, but what are you finding? We just talked about it, right? We've got this mainstream world we live in now. 20, 30 years ago, it was very like, ooh, 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 ooh. What are you experiencing as you do research, as you work on this character that puts it in the 30s? That
Yeah.
says like this was drag at the time. I mean, obviously as best as we can guess, are you
Right.
studying writings of people from around that time who were doing that kind of stuff? Are you what is that for you, that research process, and then what are you finding?
Yeah, it's been really cool to dive into that world of like 1920s, 30s Berlin and around the world. It's like the pansy craze. There was a huge like boom of queer identity and people saying like, "Hey, we're here," and then being kicked out of America and then being kicked out of like all these
Did you
countries.
say the pansy craze?
Yeah, the pansy
Is
craze.
that the defining era? Is that what you kind of? I didn't know
Yeah,
that label was on that.
yeah, it's I think it's more actually like an I think it's pansy craze is specifically like a more American thing, but they were kind of driven out of every country where homosexuality was kind of booming was quickly quieted down and condemned, and so it's kind of like people moved from like place to place. Where's safe for us to go? And France and Berlin were these like safe havens with these booming like nightlife and communities of people. And that, so like those places, like these clubs and these places were like, it was out of necessity. It was a place to belong. It was a place where, you could wear women's clothing or you could hold hands with another guy and like whatever it was, or another woman or whatever. And so all of it was way more out of this just a necessity. And
Right.
I think that is like diving into the research again, like, and that's also why it's so sad that it all got ripped away. That it's like there was finally, I mean, we're working on a scene in the play and he's talking about they were trying to make homosexuality legal and like all these things, that there was progress being had and it all just got destroyed.
Right.
Yeah, so understanding like kind of the stakes of that when you're coming in and singing a drag number, it is not just for fun. It's
Right.
it is fun, but it's your only chance to kind of express yourself. Yeah.
For sure, and I appreciate the stakes, but I was just talking to Kira as well about it. It feels like, because Greta's funny,
Yeah.
she's definitely bringing humor into the play, and we were talking about how it's easy to forget when we do these period pieces that take place in such a dramatic and scary and oppressive and oh my god, it's just like there's so much weighing on us, the stakes are so high, people are getting killed, and yet especially more recently with like Jojo Rabbit and Inglorious Bastards, and it's like there is some real humor, not just in the writing of telling the stories, but in portraying the characters. It's like when we deal with tragedy, we're funny. Not everybody, but lots of people process it that way. And so that's one of the things that I always remembered from this show, studying it and then seeing you guys do it the first time, was like, you can't lose your sense of humor when you tell these stories, because it is a fact that people who were dealing with it at the time, who also didn't realize the scope of what was to come, are going to find ways to laugh through it, to, get through it through humor and stuff like that. And then you end up finding these plays that are, or movies or whatever, that are very serious, but you're laughing your ass off at these jokes. And you're almost like, is that too dark of a joke? And it's like, hey, they were there. They can make the joke. You know what I mean? It's like how we deal with things now. There are people, Colbert goes on every night and has to make a joke about kids in cages. It's not making light of the tragedy, but it is how so many of us as human beings process it. And being in the 30s doesn't mean that you had no sense of humor.
Right, exactly. And the play does that so beautifully. It starts like I remember first reading it. It starts like a gay rom-com. Like it really does. It's like a joke after joke and you're having a great time, and that's also what makes it so tragic, is when that does start to disappear, but there is humor throughout as well, because there has to be, or else what are you fighting for?
Yeah, no, true shit. I think that's That's a great way to put it, right? And I'm that sentiment is very boldly in the play. Like, what are we fighting for if we're going to really go up against this thing? What's the point if we're going to despair and let go of who we are and our culture?
Right.
What is it like for you to be back in a world that you've been in before, not just playing the same part, doing the same play, but with a lot of the same people, and with so many classmates and stuff? I know you've worked on things with classmates since you left, but this is kind of a particular thing, right? To give another shot at a thing you've done before. What has that world been like working with everybody?
It's really special. I mean, we just started, so, I'll tell you as it goes, but right now it's great.
Right.
It feels like almost like picking up where you left off. Like, there's always so much more to find, and especially in a play that's really well written.
Right.
And so it really does kind of feel like all the, like when you start a new show or you're with new people, sometimes there's like nerves and all these things. And really sitting down with everybody, it was like, oh, we're like back home. Like we're coming back together and picking up where we left off, and there's no sweat,
Right.
It's a difficult thing we're doing, but it feels like like it was meant to be.
How does it feel doing something in a new space? Like, is it hard for you not to see yourself back in RJR? Like, are you, or, because you have these memories that happened, you did perform the show. And so in a way you lived in that world and it was in that space. What is it like moving it into a totally new environment? Like, I would imagine it's a little bigger and you've got some space to really play, especially with the drag show element. I mean, what a big part of it. Like, does being in the new space invigorate you, or how's that feeling?
Yeah, it is exciting to be like, oh, I'm not gonna be like squished behind a curtain where there's like
Right.
this much space while I'm waiting to make my entrance. It's a little more suited for a drag queeness. But so I mean, it's exciting. We're like finding new things. I think like a lot, at least personally, I'm doing like I'm like, that's old performance or that old, what it was. It's going to be there. Like, I know it happened. I'm not like, but I'm kind of like, this is the things that were meant to like seep over are going to seep through. And the things that aren't are going to stay back in the past. But it's a really cool thing to get a second chance to do a part. Like, I've never done that before. So that's like totally exciting.
This is something that I'm really curious about, and I might talk to everybody about this just because I think it's not something that I've tried to spend time on, but I see a lot of it. What is it like being in, this is going to sound like a really almost boring question, but I think because it's so simple is why it interests me so much. What is it like being in New York City of all places, like the center of American theater, and going, hey, come see our play? Like, I know that you may not know us from TV's this and Netflix's that or whatever, but it's like, what is it like to make the argument to people, come out and see this Holocaust play with these actors in it, and to try to get that off the ground? And because anytime I feel like, especially with theater, even the actors are making the case to people of, come fucking see this show. Like, you got to hustle getting people there, and that is from the stage manager to the producers to the actors. Everyone's saying it. What is it like for you to be involved in this real ground-up, grassroots kind of play producing?
Yeah. I mean, it is just that. It's like you have to constantly make the case to people to see it, especially something that's a little darker in conceit. You have to, you just kind of gotta like, I don't know. I think like we have such a good community, which is exciting, but we're trying to like branch out.
Of course.
Sell, these tickets.
Yeah, it's one thing to tell all your classmates, come check us out, and they probably will. But it's like, obviously you want to bring in other people.
Right. And I think a lot of it is also like, why, when you do any play, like the why now? Like, why are we doing this now? What's the reason? And I do think we live in a time that's scary and in some ways reflecting of that time where there is almost like a boom in like identity and like all of these things, which is great, but it's like we can relate to what is going on in this play, and kind of making that case of like, this, you need to see this, like this is important now.
Right.
That, and yeah, it's just, yeah, I mean,
There's part of
probably.
the case, right, to be made that, and this is, I think, what's going to continue to be important for theater creators, right? There are a series of plays that were produced before, let's put the cutoff at like 1940. There are a series of plays made before that, from Shakespeare to Chekhov to all this different stuff that people accept. Like, oh, you should go see that at some point
Yeah,
when
yeah,
it's being done. You know, it's like, oh, they're doing a real production of Romeo and Juliet, not some high school shit. Like they're really doing the play. It's a really fucking good play. It's one of the greatest plays of all time. Like, you really should go check out Hamlet. Like, you know, these things that we believe, even Streetcar. You know, Tennessee Williams, people are like, oh, I mean,
right.
you got a chance to see it. Go see fucking Streetcar. There's a new age of plays, you know, and that I think, I shouldn't say we maybe because I haven't made theater in a minute, but like the people who are actively creating these works and celebrating these plays are, I feel like part of the argument is like, Bent deserves that same kind of attention.
does.
Like, it's
Yeah.
that good of a play. Don't miss a chance to go see this, even if by chance, and of course this isn't you guys, it's not the best production in the world. Like, the play is that fucking important. Angels in
Right.
America. Like,
Yeah, that's a great
you know what?
example.
That's a great example of like, it's a contemporary play, but
Right.
don't miss it. Like, you have to go check this out. I feel like that's part of the argument you're making with Bend.
That's a really good point. It is such a good play. And when you say it, people aren't like, if you say Angels in America, people are like, yeah, 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 I've heard of that. Of course, every theater student. But Bent is not totally one of those yet. And I think it's done a good amount, but that is such a good point. It's kind of, you got me excited. It's kind of like we're like choosing the like classics of now.
You really are.
In
That's
some
exactly
ways.
what my point is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you say why here, why now, that is the kind of easy thing maybe about older plays is you're like, well, why here, why now? It's like, well, because fucking choosing whether or not life is worth living is always a question. So when is it not a good time to do Hamlet? Like
Right.
that, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
when is that not relevant? It's relevant
Right,
always.
right, right.
That's why we still do it all this time later. But when a play is not 400 years old, it's harder to make the case that it will survive the test of time. And also, when you haven't had, and I could be mistaken here, I don't want to misspeak, but has Bent been a film or a TV series or
It has been a film. It has
has?
been a film. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who was in
uh,
the film? Like
I-
super Hollywood celebrities, or was it like TV movie action?
I think so. I only really remember that Mick Jagger played Greta. That's what I want to say. I couldn't.
That's
I think that's
amazing.
right. Yeah, and there is someone else. Kira's thumbing up me. And there is
Clive Owen.
Clive Owen.
Oh, okay, word up.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a movie, but it's also not a really well known. Like I never heard of it before.
Right, and either probably a combination of like distribution, marketing, maybe quality. Let's not say that until we see it, but it's not Angels in America. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It didn't grab everybody's attention so that they were like, oh shit, the next time someone's doing that, we're gonna go fucking see it. Like that. Oh my god, it's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so until that exists, because unfortunately one of the best ways to market a play is for there to be a really fucking good movie version of it. Because then you can point to it and go, that thing that you guys like, I'm telling you, you gotta come check it out. It's gonna be great. But I love that you guys are a part of making that case for Bent. And as an intellectual property saying like, this will be worth your time or we wouldn't be doing it. It's not just for us to do a fun thing. And you can kind of tell because Bent is not exactly, in my opinion, the kind of content you're like, it'll just be fun. Let's just do Bent. You know what I mean? What is it?
We're all in rehearsal, like we just did the first read and we're all like bawling, crying. Like it's
Right.
not fun to put yourself in those positions. I mean, we all like, we crave that shit, but like
Sure,
it
but
is,
there's a
like-
reason to go through it. What is that reason
Yeah.
for you?
Oh golly. You know, I kind of reading it this time and recently, like the idea of identity is huge throughout the play. And for myself, like I still struggle with identity. I think everyone has to struggle with identity, even though we live in a climate that is very open and accepting. But
I mean,
even
but it's also very quick to call people out if they're not playing the fucking game right. It is a very
exactly
tough time. It's like you can be this, that, or the other, but if you have any thoughts or opinions,
right.
shut up. You know,
Right.
it's like,
And I think the play is an opportunity. You get to see a character go through that and find his identity,
right,
and that is like, I mean, for me, I think like that's what connects to me so much, at least of recent, is the and that's kind of why I guess that's my way in a little bit is finding out who you are. Even my character, has a wife and kids, and and is a bisexual man, and that is at the time, like every character is kind of struggling with identity in their
right.
own way, and yeah, that I relate to that a
I mean,
lot.
you think about the 30s. We're not super accepting of bisexuals now.
I
Like,
know, yeah,
still in LGBTQ communities, it's like there are still plenty of people who identify as one of those letters who are like, yeah, but pick one.
right,
You know what I mean? Like,
right,
I would say, like, it's still a thing. So imagine back then being like, so wait, you're gay? And he's like, no, I'm bisexual. It's like, no, you're either gay or you're
right,
not. Like
right.
we're like 20 minutes away from that being how people talk about it. So
Yeah.
imagine the 30s. Like it's absolutely it's super interesting, man. And I think I'm hoping that there's going to be a really solid taping of this that I'm going to be able to catch. No, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, man. I'm really excited for you. I think this is going to be a fucking awesome production.
I'm pumped, and thank you for having me on At the Elephants.
So
Uh,
happy too, buddy.
all right.
100%. Take it easy, dude.